everybody. My name is Molly Henson, and my genetics research topic was over addiction. I thought this would be a little different than the topics that I've done in the past, so that's why I chose it. Some topics that I discussed in my research paper were how addiction can be passed down genetically, how researchers compare chromosomes to detect addiction in children, how environmental factors play a great role in addiction, and how coping with stress and anxiety also play a role in addiction, and the various amounts of treatment that are offered today for addiction. Now, as we all know in this class, we all get genes from our parents, and Dr. Stephen Mellimus says that children are 8 times more likely to develop an addiction from their parents, and that doesn't mean it's just passed down genetically, and I thought that was really interesting. There was actually an identical twin pair study where they took 861 pairs of identical twins, and these were twins that had addictive parents. So they took 861 identical twins, and they found out that 56% ended up having an addiction of their own. I thought that was really interesting, but addiction is a choice, and it's not all genetics. And in the twin study, I mean, one twin could have not handled school or stress better than the other one, and this is maybe the reason they had an addiction, but some of it does have a role in your genetics. Now, when studying chromosomes, researchers tend to focus on the DNA family sequences, and they compare the parents to the children and see how many alike sequences they have to predict, their addiction, or the chances of them becoming addicted to something. And there's actually some genes that make it easier or harder for you to have an addiction. For example, the alcohol dehydrogenase 2 gene cannot degrade alcohol, and it actually causes headaches, irritability, and fatigue when the person consumes alcohol. So a person that would have this gene would obviously not be addicted to alcohol just because it just causes all that. But on the other hand, we have a dopamine receptor gene, DRD2, and this causes euphoria when any kind of drug or alcohol is entered into the body. So anyone with this gene would more than likely have an addiction to what they're feeding themselves. And this information is from the Genetic Science Learning Center. But addiction does generally all start in the brain, and then it just kind of folds out from there physically and emotionally, and but it all ends up being, obviously, the individual's choice because they are responsible for their own choices. But your environment also has a lot to do with your role in addiction. Those kind of factors include family support, childhood, and coping. Obviously, if you don't grow up in a good family home, you're gonna be more than likely to fall into like an addictive pattern. This could be alcohol, drugs, gambling, pornography, anything that you could fall into. And your childhood does have a big role in playing with that, just because if you don't have good role models, more than likely you will find those, in worse places. And also how you cope with different stress and situations and different life problems that happen plays a role in your choice making to being addicted. Now, during the time of adolescence is when a person is at most risk for addiction. There was a Virginia twin study that tested identical and fraternal pairs of twins that ended up resulting in the fact that marijuana, nicotine, and alcohol are set on most social and family elements. Now, this means that adolescents who didn't necessarily have the family and social structure that one is needed to succeed in life, they mostly set their eyes on marijuana and nicotine and alcohol to, in a sense, bring themselves up, or in a sense, like, escape from their problems, or just different problems that are going on in life. And the availability in adolescence to get these necessary means are so easy. It's very easy to get most addicting substance during your adolescence time because your peers, they're all around. I mean, it's very easy to access. And this information is from Senna Arts, the author of Stress Addiction. Now, although family and your lifestyle has a big role on addiction, anxiety and stress does too. learning how to cope with different things, different traumatizing events can also just lead a person to fall into depression and addiction and just bad paths for one's life. And I thought this was interesting. The director of the National Institute of Drug Abuse, Nora Volkow, stated that understanding the complex interactions between factors involved in addiction is critical to effective intervention. So understanding what makes you want to go back to that addictive property is a basic property, and learning how to, affect that, and treat that. And the first thing how to do that is just recognizing your stressors. Anyone who's addicted knows, what draws them to that addictive source, and that all starts in the brain. And just learning how to deal with that and learning how to effectively cope, if that includes, group therapy or just like, going to counseling, like just learning how to handle that puts a big stop in just the addiction in the brain and just the process that handles just the interactions involving addiction. There's a lot of factors that are involved in addiction, and learning how to live without it. And like I said, recognizing stressors is important to learn, just so you can understand how to stop that. Just learning to persevere, learning to just get away from that and live a successful life without it. Like I said, there was various amounts of treatment. But it can be more difficult to find the treatment for you because not all treatment works for everybody. There's one treatment called pharmacogenetics, and this is where pharmacists can make medications that reverse the indicators in the brain to alter their normal function when that addictive substance comes into the body. And I thought that was really interesting how in today's time we're able to do that. We're able to make medications that reverse the effects of that property. Another treatment we see is in genetic testing in mice. They have created things that encloses the drug or alcohol before it even reaches the brain. This has not been tested in humans yet, but I thought that was very important to add just because of just how far it could go. And another different treatment is just group therapy. We all know intervention and just group therapy would be great for someone who is going through, an addiction that needs help and that they need support, group support and family support. Now, to further my research, I did an interview with someone who has been addicted into the past, and I just thought this would add a very personal and just eye-opening touch to my research, just because someone who's already been through it would know a lot more than the research that it shows. So the first question was, how did your childhood affect the pathway towards drugs? And this interviewee wanted to stay anonymous, but he was indeed addicted to heroin, and he was addicted for 35 years. And the first question includes, how did your childhood affect your pathway toward drugs? Since research shows that family settings and how we grow up, can play a big role in what we fall into later in life. And the answer was, I came from a loving home with a great family but found no success in school or other activities, which made me fall into more rebellious things such as drugs. They started to become a way of life. Now, through research, we see that this is so true. With someone having no family support and just no success in school or other activities, it eventually falls more into the wrong way of life. And the second question was, how did being addicted to drugs affect your relationships? The answer was, there were hardly any good relationships at the time because my only focus was finding a way to afford more drugs. There were not any time to connect with anyone I cared about because my only feelings was withdrawal, and the drugs were the only thing I thought of. This is heartbreaking and just really just shows you just an eye-opening moment of how addiction can play on a person and just hit the relationships that are involved. Question 3 was, what was your way of coping with stress? And we know that recognizing the stressors and recognizing what causes that addictive idea to come into our head is key in stopping the addiction altogether. And the answer was abusing drugs was the only way of escaping reality because I knew how bad I'd failed in every aspect of life. I thought nothing could be fixed. And again, I just thought this interview provided a great personal aspect and how not only how the research, depicts addiction, but how it's seen, in a real life, in a real person. And question 4 was, when did you realize you needed help? And the answer was, I realized I needed help when I saw how bad my addiction affected the people around me. I missed out on too much, and this is what made me want to get help. And the last question was question 5, and how hard is it to remain sober? The answer was, I would dare go back to the way it was before, since I realized how much work it took to get here today. Now, the reflection on the interview, I just feel like it should shed a more light, and it provided more than research, it provided more than facts, because seeing it on paper and seeing it in real life is two of just amazingly different things, and it just allowed for a more personal view on this research paper. In conclusion, addiction can be passed down genetically. As we know, children are 8 times more likely to get passed down the addiction that their parents once had. And many factors affect it, including the environment, the way you cope, your childhood, your family support, and how you deal with stress and anxiety. And there's various treatment all around the world, but it's very difficult to find the one that might be right for you, for a person that you know. Thank you.